Y mira la montaña, de donde viene el viento, el sol y el agua. Tú que manejas el curso de los ríos, tú que sembraste el vuelo de tu alma.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our educational webinar, Fight Against Fascism and Fight for Freedom and People's Rights. And I will now pass to our moderator.
The existence of political prisoners worldwide is a stark indicator of global repression, reflecting a constant and violent clash between entrenched state power and the popular demand for rights and liberation. Across the globe, countless individuals, primarily rights defenders, activists, and leaders of national liberation movements, are unjustly detained for challenging the status quo. These detainees are systematically subjected to inhumane conditions that violate international law and basic human dignity, including systemic torture, arbitrary legal proceedings, forced disappearances, and the denial of essential medical care, as seen with documented abuse and the deaths of many political prisoners due to deliberately neglectful conditions in prison. The persecution of these individuals is a core tactic used by authoritarian and imperialist states to suppress effective movements for change and self-determination. This is evident in the mass detention of Palestinian political prisoners, including minors, resisting military occupation, the long-term isolation of Kurdish political prisoners, and the political sentencing of Papuan activists in Indonesia. Similarly, dominant states targeting long-standing political prisoners and activists, as seen in the cases of Black and Indigenous resistance movements in the U.S., and the imprisonment of anti-imperialist protesters in Kenya. The use of fabricated terrorism charges and legal repression underscores a global strategy to criminalize legitimate political dissent and collective liberation efforts, regardless of the detainee's age or health. Women political prisoners face systematic abuse at the hands of those who have captured and detained them, and are regularly denied their access to reproductive health, and in many cases are torn away from their children and babies still of nursing age. These governments seek to portray these prisoners of conscience as non-political to hide their persecution for their social and political beliefs. These regimes do not aim to resolve the root causes and issues of dissent and armed struggle, but rather aim to crush it and enrich themselves. While bourgeois notions of human rights tend to emphasize individual, civil, political liberties like private property, which critics argue can entrench the existing economic order, the concept of people's rights/liberation champions collective rights and views political freedoms as inseparable from socio-economic justice, including the rights to health, housing, and self-determination. The significance of this distinction is the recognition that genuine freedom requires not merely relief from state repression, but a fundamental transformation of the systemic, economic, and social roots of oppression. For this reason, the International League of People's Struggles has held a week of action from International Day of Solidarity with Political Prisoners to International Human Rights Day, from December 3rd to the 10th, to raise the issues of political prisoners languishing due to imperialism, to expose the rights violations caused by imperialism and its puppet regimes, and to champion the people's rights for liberation and a just future. Today, we are honored to be joined by an esteemed panel of speakers from different national liberation movements and struggles, from Peru, Mexico, Guatemala, Mauritania, the United Kingdom, Kurdistan, and the Philippines. They will speak about the struggles faced by political prisoners, and more importantly, their fight that we can stand in solidarity with internationally as we face the same common enemy, imperialism.
So we're going to talk about this global issue on political prisoners and the struggle against fascism. Our first presenter is Dr. Miguel Sanchez Calderon. He is a lawyer and defends victims and defends political people that are in prison. He works also defending people from Movadef. And Dr. Miguel is also the co-author of the book 50 Years on 50 Years on Enemy Criminal Law. How long will this last? Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to greet everyone, greet ILPS for inviting me to celebrate this very important week. I am Miguel Sanchez Calderon, a lawyer from Peru, and I defend political prisoners past and present in Peru. With my colleague, Dr. Alex Puente Cárdenas, we have written the book 50 Years of Enemy Criminal Law. How long will this last? With this book, we are contributing to the legal struggle against the prison and death sentences imposed on political prisoners in Peru and around the world. And we are making it available in Spanish and in PDF format. Whoever wants it, you can just raise your hand and we will send it. This book will not only be useful for Peruvians, but for all peoples around the world, because enemy criminal law is what US imperialism is imposing on all penal codes to combat the struggle for the transformation of society, for the benefit of the poor and against national liberation struggles, both of which are stigmatized as terrorism. Along with other lawyers, I defend the political prisoners of the past, that is, the members or former leaders of the Communist Party of Peru, known as Sendero Luminoso, who are serving life sentences in maximum security men's and women's prisons in Peru. They face the threat of having their remains kidnapped, incinerated, and disappeared after their death which is a retaliation for the political crime they committed between 1980 and 1992, which is leading the armed subversion against the Peruvian state, which the Communist Party of Peru called People's War, which was in violation them being persecuted is in violation of the Constitution and human rights treaties. This is not justice. As the lawyer of Professor Elena Iparraguirre Rebolledo, I have publicly denounced the assassination of her husband, Dr. Abigail Roman Reynoso, on September 11, 2021. He was the secretariat of a Peruvian institution, and he was in arms between 1980 and 1992. The proof of the assassination includes videos of the place where he was assassinated. The person who killed him was on video when he entered the institution, and our prosecutor's office has never processed these proofs. The investigation has been archived now, but those documents are in the legal process. His cadaver has been sequestered. He was incinerated and disappeared through this law that we've been talking about. So his cadaver was retained during 10 days until the law was approved. I have also been shedding light on the theft of his books and writings. Elena Iparraguirre has not been able to be present in the processes, in the diligence. They have been illegally appropriating their property in order to create new proofs against Elena also. So we reject this sinister plan to assassinate the leaders of the Peruvian Communist Party, to sequester their remains also and incinerate them. Margot Liendo Gil, who is 75, Maria Pantoja Sanchez, Laura Zambrano Padilla, Osman Morote is 84 years old, Florentino Cerón, Edmundo Cox Beusville, all of them sentenced to life in prison, and all of them are over 70 years old and have served for more than 30 years. Also, we have Florindo Flores Ala in Base Naval del Callao. All of them are political prisoners from this first stage of political persecution that started in 1980 when they criminalized the revolutionary struggle by calling it terrorism. We also defend today's political prisoners belonging to Movadef, the Movement for Amnesty and Fundamental Rights, a political party that was prevented from participating in Peru's election despite having submitted over 1 million valid signatures, and fulfilling all the legal requirements in 2011 and 2016. All the requirements were fulfilled for both elections, and now they are being persecuted and convicted for their, their ideas, for their Marxist-Leninist, Maoist ideology, and Gonzalo thought, even though the constitution in Peru prohibits the persecution of ideas. There 31 citizens have been sentenced since October 28, 2025 for 16 years in the first instance, and some are facing up to 25 years. Many of them had already served extremely long sentences for up to 30 years in some of the worst prison conditions in Peruvian history, and now they are being imprisoned again for the alleged crime of participating in the country's political life. They are in prison again. And also there are 5 former leaders of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Peru who were convicted for allegedly creating Movadef from the allegedly the maximum security prisons where they are already serving life sentences. These individuals convicted for their involvement with Movadef are political prisoners, the product of the third stage of political persecution in Peru under this enemy criminal law, which started in the case of Perseo against Movadef on October 18, 2024. They are the product of a new and broader definition of the crime of terrorism, encompassing ideas, demonstrations, graffitis, stickers, banners, and conferences. They are political prisoners of a weapon of war against subversion in a state of no war, which is the anti-terrorist legislation that the Peruvian state has maintained since the Fujimori dictatorship in 1992. This political persecution of ideas is contrary to the liberal system and the social and constitutional rule of law. Following this conviction of Movadef, this political persecution of ideas is spreading further and further against those who are protesting in the streets, against intellectuals, and even against artistic works, music, literature, paintings, and films that do not adhere to the official discourse of labeling the armed revolutionary struggle of communists in Peru in the last century as terrorism, or because also they denounce the genocidal line and policy of the state during those years, as demonstrated by the murders of the more than 50 protesters and more than 1,000 shot with weapons of war, as well as the latest murder of a member of the Generation Z in Lima itself for demanding that the current president, Jose Seri, leave office and out with them all. You have 1 minute. We therefore defend the political prisoners resulting from that popular protest, which has been criminalized in the second stage of this political persecution after the end of the Communist Party's armed struggle. Union leaders, peasants, students, and teachers are being persecuted and imprisoned, etc. We have also shed light on the murders of people who were defending President Pedro Castillo for having raised the political banner of a constituent assembly And we also salute the ILPS on December 3rd, the International Day for the Freedom of Political Prisoners, for their struggle to create an enormous front against imperialism. Now that we're facing a new wave of imperialism, people from the US have been showing their true colors, showing that they are waging war against all the world. We condemn the genocide in Gaza, which aims to wipe out the Palestinian people. We demand the freedom of Palestinian prisoners in Israel dungeons, and we demand the
Muchas
freedom of
gracias,
political
doctor
prisoners in Peru
Miguel
and around the
Sánchez. Nos
world.
ha hecho un estupendo
Thank you very
resumen de la
much, Miguel
persecución histórica
Sanchez. This
que ha
was a
sufrido el
very
Perú a
good
través
summary
sus
of
movimientos
political
revolucionarios
persecution
en lo histórico
in
y en lo
Peru
actual. Así es que muchísimas gracias. Un
before
beso
and
fuerte para
now.
ustedes
So thank you very
desde todos
much.
los
We stand
espacios
in
donde operamos como
solidarity.
límite nacional, doctor Miguel Sánchez. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Damos paso a nuestra siguiente participante, nuestra siguiente
Now
ponente, que
we'll give
hablará
the
sobre la
floor
situación de los presos
to
políticos en
Diana,
México
who
y
is
en el
going to
resto
talk about the situation of
del mundo.
political prisoners
Profesora
in
Diana
Mexico and around the
Mendieta es
world.
coordinadora
Diana
internacional
Mendieta
y
is
nacional de la sección
national and
mexicana del
international
Comité
coordinator
Internacional de Coordinación
of
para la Solidaridad
the
y la
International
Libertad de los
Coordinating
Presos
Committee for
Políticos y
Solidarity and
Revolucionarios del
Freedom
Mundo,
of
una red
Revolutionary Political
antiimperialista que
Prisoners
promueve
of
la
the
lucha
world,
por la libertad de los
an
presos
anti-imperialist
políticos
network uplifting
en
the
todo el
struggle for
mundo
the
y contra
freedom
la
of political
persecución
prisoners
política.
worldwide and
Adelante,
against
profesora
political
Diana, bienvenida.
persecution. Diana, you have
Muchas
the floor.
gracias. Muy buenas noches desde México. En primer lugar, queremos externar nuestro combativo saludo a todos los presos políticos del mundo. Estamos viendo aquí participantes desde Guatemala, Kenia, Reino Unido, Palestina, Kurdistán, Turquía y de América Latina, por supuesto, Perú, Chile, Colombia y Argentina. Nuestro más fraternal saludo combativo. Continuamos en la lucha y jamás los vamos a dejar solos. Agradecemos en segundo lugar la invitación de ILPS para participar en el presente webinario después de conmemorar exitosamente la Semana por la Libertad de los Presos Políticos que nos hermana. Exigimos la liberación de los presos y el cese a la persecución política a los integrantes de la Coordinadora Internacional de Solidaridad y por la Libertad de los Presos Políticos Revolucionarios del Mundo, Base México. Voy a platicarles acerca de los presos en México. No descansaremos hasta lograr la libertad absoluta e incondicional de nuestro compañero chiapaneco Juan Díaz Montejo, dirigente del Frente Democrático Revolucionario de Obreros y Campesinos FEDROC e integrante del Secretariado Ejecutivo Nacional e Internacional de nuestra coordinadora. Él es el primer peso político del gobierno de Eduardo Ramírez Aguilar.
Juan Diaz is the first political prisoner under the government of Eduardo Ramirez in Chiapas. We demand punishment for the military personnel responsible for the extrajudicial execution of Damián Genoves III and the safe return of Alejandro III of the broad opposition movement for national liberation. We denounce the harassment and persecution of our comrade Ángel Ibarra III of the same organization belonging to the Chiapas base, who was dispossessed of his house and personal and family belongings, with consequent death threats against him for defending the human rights of the members of his organization and defending the Rivera Maya community to which he belongs, its territory, and its way of life. Similarly, we denounce the torture and unjust imprisonment of our comrade Oscar Trinidad from the same organization. We call for the release of the prisoners in solidarity with the Voz del Amate. Chiapas is in the south of our country. It's the border with Guatemala. We also condemn the systematic repression and criminalization that the Maztec people of El Oxoxtlan de Flores Magón, Oaxaca have suffered for more than 10 years. We demand immediate cancellation of the 200 arrest warrants against environmental defenders. We defend the we demand the definite closure of unjust legal proceedings against former prisoners Hermanio Mulfil, Fernando Gavito, Alfredo Bolaños, Jaime Ventazos, and Francisco Duran, who are suffering renewed judicial and political persecution. They safe return and absolute freedom of the 14 political exiles, justice and protection guaranteed for photojournalist David Peralta Ventazos, victim of an attempted murder. An end to the damage caused by the excessive exploitation of the Sanca Negue River by the local bosses Manuel Cepeda Cortés and Elisa Cepeda Lagunas. In Tasala, we demand an end to the persecution against human rights defender Juan Manuel Sanchez Hernandez. In the metropolitan region, we demand the release of lawyer and human rights defender Kenia Inés Hernandez Montalvan, the release of construction worker Tomás Martínez Mandujano, leader of the Llano Grande Azcopotzaltongo community in the state of Mexico, and a solution to the demands of the Haz Valer Mi Libertad, Make My Freedom Count collective, which represents unjust imprisoned citizens. We denounce the persecution of the Nesa Norte anti-imperialist merchants group. From the state of San Luis Potosí, we demand the release of Professor and lawyer Miguel Ángel Guzmán Muchel, accused without evidence of terrorism, detained after years of political persecution. From the state of Querétaro, we demand the release of José Alejandro Choa Valencia, a social and political leader from the municipality of Colón, imprisoned since September 22, 2023. And from the state of Guanajuato, we demand the immediate release of Samuel Guerrero Lino, persecuted since 2009 for participating in a movement to defend land appropriated by American businessmen. Based on the principles of the coordinating committee, we denounce the imperialist wars of plunder, primarily those of the US imperialism in our country, through the interference of its police agencies, such as the DEA, the FBI, and the CIA, in collaboration with the Attorney General's office and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which 2 years ago threatened one of our comrades with extradition if Peru requested it. In this context, a fundamental struggle is for the freedom of political prisoners against persecution, against criminalization, against the reactionary policies of states, against preparations for unjust war, against ongoing wars, and against, among other things, the concept of enemy criminal law, which was explained by Dr. Miguel in the Peruvian case. We fight vigorously against the murder and disappearance of social activists. We call upon the peoples of the world to join the struggle for the freedom of political prisoners. Political prisoners of the world, freedom. Stop political persecution. Down with enemy criminal law. We demand an end to the US imperialism plan of extermination against political prisoners. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, profesora Diana. Muy
Thank
amable,
you
gracias
very
por la
much, Diana.
educación sobre lo que está pasando
Thank
en
you
México y
for
toda nuestra
giving us this
solidaridad
information on
y
what's happening
respaldo de
in
Francia
Mexico.
Internacional a esa lucha
We stand in
incansable por la
solidarity
liberación
with
de estos
you
presos políticos y
and with
compañeros y
your
compañeras
struggle
y compañeros que están librando
with
este
all
proceso
our
complejo y
comrades
difícil.
who
Toda
are
nuestra solidaridad.
carrying on this very, very complex process. We stand in
Nuestro
solidarity
siguiente
with all
ponente
of you. Our
hablará
next
sobre la situación de los
speaker
defensores de la tierra
will
en
speak
Guatemala.
on the situation
Es
of
una
land
reconocida
defenders in
organización,
Guatemala.
es una
Norma
guatemalaya
Sarcis is
caciquense,
a
periodista
Maya Karchikel woman and community journalist specializing in indigenous people's rights, land defense, and climate justice in Guatemala. She is a contributor to radio and digital media. Norma, you have the floor. Thank you. Good afternoon, all. Good morning. Good evening. My name is Norma Sancir. I am a community journalist, and I adhere to the solidarity and the demands that all of us are doing from this space. I've been doing journalism in different formats in Guatemala for the last 15 years. I've faced criminalization myself. I will be telling you a little bit about this. But to start, I'd like to share a bit about Guatemala. We are three peoples in Guatemala: Maya, Xinca, Garifuna, and Mestizo people. From the Maya people, we have 22 people. I am Maya Cachiquel. I've been working in a particular community for some years now, getting to know all the cases, getting to know cases of in people that are imprisoned and have been criminalized. And I was going to the hearings, and I never thought I would be in that I would be facing this criminalization. In Guatemala, since the colony and then our alleged independence, we've had liberal, revolutionary, counter-revolutionary, and military governments. We had only 10 years of what we call the spring. Jacobo Arbenz was the most known president from that stage. And in 1986, we start a democratic government era. After 36 years of internal armed conflict, we signed a peace treaty. This armed conflict had there were many people that were murdered, displaced, disappeared. Many people had to travel to Mexico, and I am the daughter of a woman who was displaced by the war. Now we have a progressive government. Some call it a transition government. But within our state structure, they have the corruption agreement, what we call the corruption agreement. And so the state is quite co-opted. The government has not been able to do a lot because our state is co-opted. Our last government, Yamatel was our last president. He tried to do many actions that seemed directed to establish a fascist government. Our struggles for indigenous people's rights persist. Our right for our own way of living, for example. And after the 36 years of war, indigenous peoples who were the most affected by the war, we're still struggling for our rights. We are struggling against land dispossession, against extractivist companies and transnational companies that bring their projects without any previous consultation. Transnational companies want to build hydroelectrics, and also capital from Guatemala want to establish more monocrops like sugarcane. The Quechua people have faced most of the violent dispossessions. There is an important actor, the public ministry, the government of Jimmy Morales and Yamatei. There were Yamatei dismantled the Commission Against Corruption. And the new public ministry is creating different cases, imprisoning people, and using the justice system to attack people. People's struggle persists. There is still persecution, imprisonment, criminalization against people that are defending land. Many people who opposed some of these extractivist projects are now in jail. But since 2022, 2023, this criminalization included people that work in the justice system, like judges and lawyers, and also journalists, of course. Jose Rubén Zamora is journalist. His newspaper was closed, and now he's living in exile. And there are many people, journalists and authorities, indigenous authorities, that are living in exile today. So the justice system is used both for criminalizing us and also to defend our rights. In my case, in 2014, when I was working as a journalist, it was very important for us to make very big demonstrations in order to get the mainstream media's attention. So I went to document one of these manifestations, one of these protests. I was detained for 5 days and criminalized. They said I wasn't really a journalist, that I was leading the protest, that I had attacked police, but I actually wasn't even there. I managed to get out of jail thanks to the help of some organization, and I put up a claim against the police worker, the police people who detained me. I've I looked for justice for more than 10 years, and only last year we managed to get a ruling in my favor. And this ruling is very important because it recognizes four important elements. It recognizes community journalism. It recognizes identity. It recognizes that an indigenous woman can do journalism because they said that I should not be there, that I should be at home because I was an indigenous woman. It recognizes gender. It recognizes the right of these people to receive information. So this is a very big accomplishment that we achieve through the justice system. And last week, I was reporting on some of the hearings on Yorti people. The last ruling recognizes the right of Yortis people to manifest and protest. It says that their organizations should be respected, and in the context of and that the context of the manifestation or the protest was it was against a mining company. So we need to make justice even though we have a co-opted justice system. Next year is going to be very, very important. So it's important to create these networks and join our struggle. Thank you very much. We know you're in a community that you don't have a very good internet, but those are the challenges. It's been very nice to hear from all of you. So it's very important to listen to all this story, all this history on political prisoners. In Guatemala, there were no political prisoners. These people disappeared. So it's important to mention that during these 36 years of war, they were not there were not people in jail. This is a new phenomenon in Guatemala. We need to be very aware and pay a lot of attention to what's happening in Guatemala now. Thank you very much, Norma. You can ask your questions through the chat, and at the end, we will read them so our panelists may answer the questions you all have. Our next speaker will provide a video message on the situation of the anti-fascist struggle in Mauritania. The speaker will be Dr. Kane Abdul Wahab, the Secretary General of the Union of Free Trade Unions of Mauritania.
Khan Abdul Wahab, Secrétaire général de l'ISLM, Union syndicale libre de Mauritanie. En ce jour 10 décembre, Journée internationale des droits de l'homme, sous le thème du fascisme, des prisonniers politiques et des droits du peuple en Mauritanie. La Mauritanie, à travers une histoire politique marquée par des formes de gouvernance autoritaire et des pratiques répressives sous le régime de Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz entre 2009 et 2019. De nombreux observateurs ont relevé une intensification de la répression contre les opposants, les journalistes et les défenseurs des droits de l'homme. Les libertés publiques, notamment la liberté d'expression, de réunion et de la presse, ont été fortement restreintes, créant un climat de silence forcé et de peur. La question des prisonniers politiques demeure au cœur de ces préoccupations. Plusieurs citoyens ont été arrêtés pour leur opinion ou leur critique du pouvoir. Les conditions de détention ont souvent été dénoncées comme inhumaines, incluant des cas de torture de mauvais traitements et de privation de soins médicaux. Plus largement, les droits du peuple mauritanien ont été régulièrement bafoués, les manifestations autorisées pacifiques ont été réprimées et fait l'objet d'intimidations et de poursuites. Cette situation a affaibli les institutions démocratiques et limité l'espace civique. Face à ces défis, il apparaît essentiel de consolider la démocratie, de garantir le respect des droits humains, de libérer les prisonniers politiques et de renforcer les mécanismes nationaux de protection des libertés fondamentales.
Muchísimas gracias a Dr. Cave.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kane from Mauritania. We stand in solidarity from here, from America, from Asia. We're standing solidarity for the defense of political prisoners and the struggle for freedom in all regions. We cannot talk about the fight for people's rights and the struggle of political prisoners without talking about Palestine. Since 1967, over 1 million Palestinians have been detained by Israel. Before the recent ceasefire and prisoner exchange, there were over 10,000 Palestinians imprisoned by Israel. With over 20% of Palestine's population seeing the inside of a jail cell, the illegal occupation's policy of trying Palestinians in military courts instead of judicial ones, and now people in solidarity with Palestine being charged with terrorism. The struggle for a free Palestine is intertwined with the fight for the rights of political prisoners. The fight for a free Palestine has been taken up by the whole world, and many people fight in solidarity with the Palestinian people as they resist the brutal Zionist occupation. While the harshest repression is meted against the Palestinian people themselves, the worldwide repression against the Palestine Solidarity Movement has targeted activists in many countries, leading to many political prisoners of conscience. A notable case of political prisoners that been detained due to their solidarity with Palestine is Palestine Action in the UK. Palestine Action has been proscribed and banned as a terrorist organization. In the UK, 33 people have been held on remand without trial or bail and waiting up to 2 years until the trial. This has become the largest hunger strike in UK history since the famous hunger strike of Bobby Sands and other Irish Republicans fighting against British colonialism in the north of Ireland. Currently, 8 of the political prisoners are on hunger strike, demanding the end of all censorship, immediate bail, right to a fair trial, the proscription of Palestine Action as a terrorist organization, and shut ILPS down. We will now listen to a video testimony from the imprisoned hunger strikers themselves.
We know ILPS system's crimes, its evils. We know they've made £2 billion profit off of 2025's year of genocide alone. We see how explicitly it isn't in their interest to stop surveilling and battle testing their weapons on the bodies of Palestinians. We understand the euphemisms behind the so-called surging demand following decades of live trials. There has never been, there never could be, any justification nor can we go back. The damage is done, and even if ceasefire was more than a wasted breath of a word, we will never be able to compute, let alone feel, the depth of devastation, the death, the dispossession, displacement, the attack on education, infrastructure, healthcare, farms, and olive groves. Naming these things does nothing to change them. We have enabled and profited from the conversion of Palestine into a battlefield. Its people, histories, and infrastructures a whetstone for increasingly impersonal tools of war. Palestine is not a laboratory, and the Zionist entity does not pull these horrors from beyond the realms of our worst nightmares. ILPS Systems and its centre in Bristol manufacture quadcopter components. And somewhere, listening to Radio 6, a midwife of cruelty programs a quadcopter with the sound of a baby's cries, until a Palestinian must fight not just an occupation of the very air they breathe, but their own instincts to preserve a life beyond their own. Zionism is a supply chain. Its arms are far-reaching. It has factory lines, shipping timetables, and it's in our courtrooms, newspapers, and airfields. And we know that our governments are vaccinated by blood money against any politics of appeal. We see their mouths move and Zionist bullshit waft out in clouds of gas chamber ash. So we turn off the taps, we open the doors, we sledgehammer the ovens. We strike them where it hurts, their pockets, until genocide is no longer a business proposal, until they put us in prison, until it doesn't matter where they put us, until there are more of us than them, until money isn't printed in Gazan blood, until people who sign up to commit war crimes aren't laughing at our dinner tables, until Palestine is free.
Our imprisonment signals not a new chapter in the UK's authoritarianism, but a return to a much-tried tactic against resistance before us across the British Empire, from the Irish and the suffragettes in UK prisons to the mass imprisonment of freedom fighters in the British colonies resisting the imperial project, and transformation of entire lands into prisons, such as the islands they sent anti-South African apartheid freedom fighters to. Britain is once again realizing that the weak remnants of its empire, manifested in the illegitimate Zionist entity, the imperial implant in the Middle East, are under threat from the movement for the liberation of Palestine, especially its uncompromising and unceasing direct action frontier. Our hunger strike is a continuation of our resistance, not just to this desperate and dying colonial order, but also to the returning authoritarianism of the UK. We cannot sit by and watch activists be imprisoned and pensioners be arrested and jury trials be scrapped. We have to push back on our government's imperial nostalgia. We have to resist.
Thank you to the hunger strikers for your unconditional solidarity with the Palestinian people. For those who want to support their campaign, you can read more about prisoners in the UK on the website prisonersforpalestine.org/prisoners and prisonersforpalestine.org/demands. Their words remind us of the severe mistreatment and torture of thousands of Palestinian political prisoners, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of martyrs from the Zionist genocide. The fight for people's rights must acknowledge that self-determination and sovereignty are the surest way to achieve the full human rights for the people. It's in the collective struggle of the peoples and not in the individual recognition of rights where we must search for justice. It is in this spirit of justice that the ILSP joined other organizations in convening the International People's Tribunal on Palestine in Barcelona from November 20 to 23 this year. The tribunal provided a platform for witnesses from Gaza and the West Bank, as well as experts in studies of genocide, along with ecological, medical, and agricultural science, to give testimony that found Israel, the US, and other governments are complicit in of genocide, ecocide, and forced starvation in Palestine. Long live Free Palestine. You can read the full verdict and learn more about the proceedings of the tribunal by going to the website internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal. We will be displaying a video segment from the tribunal showcasing two of the experts, Raji Saurani from the Palestinian Center of Human Rights and Dr. Osman Najave, speaking about how the concepts of bourgeois justice are weaponized against people's resistance and self-determination in the form of the recent UN Security Council resolution on Gaza, and what the people's response should be. Please go ahead with the video.
This recent Security Council decision, which was a Trump and the US-led decision, how do you as the Palestinian people view this, and what is going to be its impact and implications, particularly in this context of ongoing genocide, ecocide?
Well, first of all, I have to say that the genocide and the ethnic cleansing continuing non-stop till this moment. Only yesterday, all over Gaza Strip, there was a bombing, killing, destruction. So the conditions unchanged. Now, regarding the Security Council resolution itself, there wasn't one word about Palestinians' right of self-determination. There isn't one word about the unalienable rights of the Palestinian people. There wasn't a word about ending the genocide and the ethnic cleansing in Gaza.
In disarming any form of resistance inside the Gaza Strip by foreign force, it is depriving the Palestinians a fundamental right that is the right to resist colonialism and occupation in all means, and that is according to the UN Charter. I mean, the resolution is obscene. It is a hypocrisy.
It's unprecedented that Security Council victimize and destroy 80 years of legal political work. It's a big scandal and it's a big shame.
So now the institution in crisis is the United Nations. There is 3 orders by the International Court of Justice to allow basic food into Gaza. And the orders that come out of it are supposed to be respected. It's not that it didn't abide by it, it did the exact opposite. That is why it is really an excellent initiative to have a People's Tribunal, since the legal tribunals are really deficient.
It's a tradition that a People's Tribunal like this one intervenes in situations where either there is no forum, either there is a lack in the law, or when there is no will, obviously no will to apply the law. And I think that is typically situations where a People's Tribunal should step in and try to either create law, to push for the political will, or to push for the creation of a forum.
Thank you again. I was there in Barcelona and it was wonderful. Everyone who participated brought a lot to the table, and it gave us a lot of information on what's really happening in Palestine. We stand in solidarity with Palestinian people. You can visit the website internationalsolidarity.org/tribunal to learn more about the tribunal itself and its verdict. Our next speaker will speak on the fight for Kurdish self-determination and the current state of Kurdish political prisoners. We were going to watch a video that did not arrive. We received a document that I will be reading. It's my honor to read this document. Dear participants, thank you for joining today. I am pleased to speak with you about the increasingly urgent human rights situation in Turkish prisons, a crisis that has become deeper, more complex, and increasingly systematic in recent years. According to the most recently released data 428,267 prisoners are held in 402 prisons across Turkey, although the official capacity is 304,886. This means that the system is operating far beyond its limits, with overcrowding one of the most serious structural challenges. Of this population, 120,176 prisoners are held in open institutions and 307,091 in closed prisons. A striking aspect of the prison population in its composition is that there are 363,159 people are convicts, 65,000 are pre-trial detainees, 14,276 are foreign nationals, 269 prisoners have disabilities, and 6,625 prisoners are over the age of 65. The situation of children is particularly alarming. There are 4,682 children aged 12 to 18, including 194 girls, are currently held in prison. Alongside 19,775 women prisoners, there are 434 children aged 0 to 3 and 388 children aged 4 to 6 living with their mothers in prison settings. These numbers reflect profound concerns regarding child welfare and the broader impact of incarceration of families. Mortality data further highlights systemic deficiencies. The number of prisoners who died in prison was 107 in 2018, 95 in 2019, 128 in 2020, 101 in 2021, and 108 in 2022. These figures indicate chronic problems in healthcare access, emergency response, and overall detention conditions. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed and intensified long-standing inequalities within the prison system. Although international human rights bodies, including the CPT, the UN High Commissioners for Human Rights, and the Council of Europe Commissioner issued clear recommendations to reduce prison populations and ensure that human rights were not further eroded through this crisis, Turkey's approach was highly discriminatory. Legal reforms adopted during the pandemic explicitly excluded individuals convicted under political or terrorism-related charges, despite the lack of evidence supporting many of these prosecutions. At the same time, strict restrictions on family visits and access to lawyers undermined detainees' rights and well-being. Rather than using the pandemic as an opportunity to implement humane measures, the system reinforced existing inequalities. One of the most persistent structural problems is the extraordinarily broad definition of terrorism in Turkish legislation. International standards require terrorism to be narrowly defined and limited to acts involving serious violence. However, in Turkey, acts such as political speech, journalism, or participation in civil society activities are frequently interpreted as terrorism offenses. The UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Counterterrorism has repeatedly emphasized that Turkey's definition violates the principle of legality and falls outside international norms. As a result, thousands face prolonged pretrial detention, stigmatizing terrorism charges, restricted access to fair trial guarantees, and this legal ambiguity fuels systematic rights violations and undermine public trust in the justice system. Following the abolition of the death penalty, Turkey introduced aggravated life imprisonment, a regime characterized by extreme isolation and the total absence of conditional release. Essentially, it requires prisoners to spend the rest of their lives in high security, often solitary confinement. The European Court of Human Rights has ruled most notably in the Öcalan, Gurban, and Kaitan cases that this regime violates the Article 3 of the European Convention because it removes the right to hope, which is a fundamental component of human dignity. Despite these rulings, Turkish law continues to impose sentences that offer no realistic prospect of reintegration. There are currently 1,605 sick prisoners in Turkish prisons, including 604 in critical conditions. The treatment of sick prisoners remains one of the most urgent and troubling areas. Hundreds of prisoners with severe illnesses are unable to receive adequate medical care. Problems include delays in referrals to hospitals, security measures that interfere with treatment, reliance on Forensic Medicine Institute reports that lack independence, administrative barriers to release in a manner consistent with human dignity. As a result, many seriously ill individuals remain in detention even when they do not pose a threat to society and even when imprisonment endangers their survival. The, there's, the mortality figures mentioned earlier provide stark evidence of these systematic failures. Recent legal amendments have significantly restricted access to conditional release, specifically for individuals convicted under anti-terror legislation. Good behavior assessments conducted by administrative and observation boards composed entirely of prison staff are often subjective, opaque, and inconsistent. Even after prisoners have served their full period required by law, release may be denied based on minor disciplinary issues or board interpretations of insufficient rehabilitation. This transforms the execution of sentence systems into an additional layer of punishment beyond what courts originally imposed. The data and developments we have examined today paint a clear picture. Turkey's prison system is in the midst of a profound human rights crisis. Overcrowding, discriminatory legislation, inadequate health care, the erosion of due process, and the denial of hope collectively form a system that fails to meet international human rights standards. International law is unambiguous. No one should be deprived of dignity. No one should be denied access to health care. No one should be condemned to a life without the possibility of conditional release. And no child should grow up behind prison walls due to systematic failures. Meaningful reform requires transparency, independent monitoring, legislative change, and a commitment to human rights as a guiding principle, not an exception. Finally, I would like to add that despite the ongoing peace process in Turkey, which represents an important opportunity for all of us, no legal or structural steps have yet been taken regarding releases or the improvement of prison conditions, such as the abolition of solitary confinement. Thank you for your attention and your dedication to advancing human dignity. We will now hear. Uh, we're very sorry we could not have them participating live with us. That's why we read the document they sent. But now we will hear about the current fights, the current struggle of political prisoners in the Philippines. Our next speaker will be Winona Birondo from CELDA, Association an association organization of former political prisoners in the Philippines that advocates for the release of all political prisoners, humane treatment in detention, justice for victims of human rights violation, and legislative support for indemnification and rehabilitation. She will be speaking on the situation and demands of political prisoners from the Philippine island of Negros. Winona, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good day to everyone. The speech's title is Fight Back Fascism, Fight for Freedom and People's Rights. Warm militant greetings to all human rights defenders, people's organizations, communities, and advocates joining us today. Our gathering is not only timely, it is necessary. Because while the world spoke of human rights last December 10, hundreds of our fellow Filipinos languished in dark cells, enduring unspeakable abuse at the hands of a fascist state. Today, we raise our voices for them. Today, we fight back. Comrades, friends, and colleagues, there are 697 political prisoners across the country. Peasant and labor organizers, human rights defenders, development workers, and even ordinary citizens who have been unjustly imprisoned for standing with the people. Among them are 93 elderly detainees and 89 seriously ill prisoners whose continued incarceration is nothing less than a slow and deliberate death sentence. These are not criminals. These are farmers and workers fighting for land and decent wages. These are human rights defenders demanding justice. These are development workers bringing services to the poorest communities. These are ordinary citizens red tagged and slapped with fabricated charges by the Department of Justice simply because they dared to uplift the oppressed. In Negros, this cruelty reached yet another peak. As the world prepared for International Human Rights Day, the political prisoners and persons deprived of liberty at the Negros Occidental District Jail male dormitory entered their 120th day of state-inflicted suffering. Their protest fast on December 3 was not merely a symbolic act. It was a cry for dignity, in the face of relentless abuse, a cry that the state blatantly ignored. Under the command of Warden Jail Superintendent Crisirel P. Awe, the NODJMD has been a torture chamber masquerading as a jail. What should be a facility for custody has been transformed into a laboratory of repression, a place where the UN Nelson Mandela rules and our own domestic laws are treated as meaningless scraps of paper. For 120 days, the PDLs endured drastic food ration cuts, shutdown of all educational, livelihood, and rehabilitative programs, arbitrary restrictions on family visitations, denial of sunlight and exercise, confiscation and destruction of personal property, withholding of essential medicines, collective punishment, and 23 to 24-hour lockdowns. These are not administrative lapses. These are deliberate acts of dehumanization. The deadly consequence of this cruelty became undeniable when one of the prisoners, Warlito Turbela, died on November 7, 2025. Another political prisoner, Lorenzo Tisoy Perodino, was subjected to prolonged solitary confinement, a violation so severe that the Regional Trial Court Branch 44 in Bacolod was compelled to recognize it. These are not isolated cases. This is the face of state terror inside Philippine jails. Across the country, abusive jail officials operate with impunity while plunderers walk free and powerful criminals enjoy comfort. Meanwhile, those who fight for justice are left to rot, denied sunlight, denied medicine, denied dignity. Despite petitions, documentation, rallies, and complaints filed before the Commission on Human Rights and the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, the abuses persist. This impunity is not accidental. It is calculated. It is meant to break resistance, to criminalize dissent, and to crush the human spirit of those who continue to stand for truth and justice. But comrades, the prisoners have not surrendered. Their protest fast, launched during the lead up to Human Rights Day, was a declaration that even behind bars, the fight lives. Their demands are clear and urgent. The removal or suspension of the abusive warden, the restoration of all educational, livelihood, and rehabilitative programs, adequate food, sunlight, medicine, and family visitation, protection from retaliation, and deep structural reform to dismantle the systemic cruelty rotting inside our jail system. For 120 days, they have appealed to churches, legal institutions, media outlets, human rights groups, and the public. Their struggle is not theirs alone. It is the struggle of every detainee suffering under a jail system built on fear, violence, and impunity. Today in this webinar, we say enough. Enough of fascism, enough of the criminalization of dissent, enough of a system where those who serve the people are punished and those who plunder the nation are protected. We fight back because the struggle of political prisoners is the struggle of the entire Filipino people. When they raise their fists behind bars, they raise them for all of us. When they endure starvation and abuse, they endure them in pursuit of a freer, more just society. Our call is clear. Free all political prisoners. Fight fascism. Defend our freedom and people's rights. The state may cage bodies, but it cannot cage truth. It cannot cage resistance. It cannot cage a people determined to win justice, dignity, and liberation. Let us continue the fight inside jails, in our communities, in the streets, and in every arena where the people's voice must be heard. Makibaka, huwag matakot. free all political prisoners, fight back fascism, fight for freedom and the people's rights.
Thank you very much, Comrade Winona. This was a wonderful expose on what's happening in Philippines, and we in Latin America stand in solidarity and send a big hug to this your revolutionary peoples that are struggling against the oppressor. We will remain in the Philippines and hear about a campaign for a particular political prisoner and union leader, Mau Maga. We will hear about the campaign from Kai Koshi, the Secretary General of Canada, Philippine Solidarity for Human Rights. This is an anti-imperialist solidarity organization promoting advocacy and campaigns in defense of human rights in the Philippines. A member of the ILPS and the International Coalition of Human Rights in the Philippines. This organization provides material and political support for the National Democratic Revolution in the Philippines. You have the floor, Comrade.
Hello, everybody. It is such an honor to be here with you today. All of you here united against fascism and in the fight for freedom and the fight for human rights. And thank you, Nona, for sharing about political prisoners in Negros and across the Philippines. Today, I'm also speaking with you about political prisoners in the Philippines, but from a solidarity perspective. And particularly, I will focus on our current campaign at CPSHR to free a dear friend of a migrants' rights organizer here from where I sit in so-called Vancouver. His name is Mauj Maga. Mauj is a former student activist and a longtime trade unionist, labor organizer, and political prisoner in the Philippines who has been unjustly incarcerated on trumped-up charges for over 7 years. Mauj was snatched off of the streets at a basketball court while simply playing a game with his friends. At the time, he was just about to leave to deliver his son lunch at school. Instead, he was abducted by over a dozen plainclothesmen and was subjected to hours of interrogation and psychological torture and not given the chance to contact his lawyers and family. Originally charged with false allegations of firearm possession, he finally got his charges dropped a few years ago as they were completely fabricated. And yet he remains in prison as he was slapped with even more charges, including a charge of murder on an island in Mindanao he has never even been to. And what was his so-called crime? Mauj is a union organizer. He is a member of Piston Transport Coalition, and he was fighting for the rights and dignity of transport workers in the Philippines. He himself was a former jeepney driver, and he was supporting the strikes of public transport workers who had had enough of corrupt greenwashing programs. These programs are costing jeepney drivers their jobs, their livelihoods, and even their lives. As just a few weeks ago, a Piston Union member was ambushed and murdered in his own home. Mauj was also a part of organizing with the coalition of trade unions called Kilusang Mayo Uno, KMU, or May 1st Movement, which is a coalition of unions across the Philippines united against imperialism. Mauj and all political prisoners are experiencing inhumane treatment every day, from cramped and overcrowded cells, denial of basic needs like food and water, torture, constant harassment, and so much more. Even throughout his almost 8 years of imprisonment, Mauj continues to organize on the inside. Alongside his fellow political prisoners, Mauj has reshaped the prison population into organized bodies with elected representatives and has been able to achieve major wins from inside the prison. Mauj joins many other Filipino political prisoners who have made massive wins behind bars, such as ensuring all Muslim political prisoners are able to have access to a prayer room, and all prisoners on the inside are able to access a prayer room, and ending the nightly padlocks on jail doors, and much more. I will now share some updates directly from Mauj, as just a few weeks ago, one of our members of CPSHR was able to go and visit Mauj in prison and hear his story directly. Mauj shared that his current battle is won in the courtroom. He is trying to get rid of his last 3 trumped-up charges. He has so far dismissed 6. He shared that this was one of the most difficult moments, was feeling crushed by the court cases, which take years and years and so much money to navigate. One of the most difficult moments for him was when, immediately after getting his initial charges dismissed, he discovered through a release of Information Act that he was falsely accused of even more charges to keep him in prison longer. But with the help of his fellow unionists and outside supporters, he continues fighting and organizing inside the prison, and he keeps connected with the current conditions of the working masses and up to date on the news on the outside world. At one point during their conversation, Mauj shared that during his worst moments, he feels like he's already dead. His separation from the people and the workers is too much at times. It's one of the primary tools the fascist forces use to break organizers, and that isolation is absolutely a form of torture. But our member shared that, in fact, hundreds and hundreds have heard his story, and there is a broad coalition here of labor, faith, youth, and human rights activists, as well as people across the world calling for his release. Mauj shared that he continuously feels our solidarity with him and thanks us for our support for his freedom. When he is released, he intends on going right back to organizing workers for better conditions and a better society. He also said that once he is free, he would love to come to Canada to visit his sister in Alberta and his best friend in Vancouver, and to celebrate with all the organizers who have supported his case. I know I speak on behalf of all of CPSHR when I say we cannot wait to welcome Mauj. The absurd lengths the Philippine state and states around the world will go to in order to silence Filipino organizers shows the real threat and power of the national democratic movement in the Philippines. This is a threat to the global system of imperialism. We at CPSHR organize to popularize the Philippine Revolution from wherever we are so that we can build a strong enough movement to fight imperialism everywhere and win. And we want to share exciting news about our campaign to free Mauj. We now have over 400 signatures on the petition for his release, but we need more to make our voices heard at the top of the Canadian state. So we invite you now to pull out your phones or go online to the link and sign this petition and tell your friends to sign too. I think we'll also link the petition in the chat for you to sign. We are also building up to a big action on Mauj's 8th anniversary of incarceration, which is February 22nd, so stay tuned. Finally, we would like to assert that union organizing is not a crime. Free Mauj now. Free all political prisoners, and long live international solidarity. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Kai. Por supuesto que nos sumamos a la campaña.
Thank you very much, Kai. We, of course, adhere to the solidarity campaign from Guatemala, Latin America, and the world, so we can work towards Mauj liberation. We will be signing the petition, of course. And now we have our last panelist. We had our last panelist, so we will move on to our questions and answer part of the webinar. For the audience, you can either put your questions in the Q&A or raise your hand to be unmuted to ask your question. Please keep questions brief due to the amount of speakers and the limited time left in the program. We hope answers will also be very concrete. So we now open the space for Q&A. If any of you have any questions, please raise your hand so we can activate your mic.
Mientras alguien se anima a hacer una pregunta, yo tengo por acá ya 2 preguntas formuladas.
I have two questions here. One for Diana, who was raising her hand. How was the fifth meeting of the coordinator for the liberation of political prisoners around the world? Yes, thank you. It took place on November 15th, 16th, and 17th in Mexico. People from Mexico participated from different spaces from different places from Mexico. Chiapas, Oaxaca, the metropolitan area, and there were also people participating from Chile, Colombia, organizations from Turkey also. It was very important because above all, we keep working in our unity at an international level for our struggle against political imprisonment. In this context of preparation for the Third World War, in this advancement of the right in Latin America, we know that it's very important to give the good fight because there are many political prisoners. We don't even know the actual number of people imprisoned and people who are being killed, murdered, and tortured in this precise moment. It's very important to raise our voice. I can share our conclusion. We shared an international communication, and there were some declarations for the freedom of political prisoners. We agreed on our practical work for our next 13 years. You can check our Facebook, and if you want any additional information, we're happy to answer. And with ILPS, there is an important agreement. We reached an important agreement on December 3rd. There are different dates for this commemoration in Europe on March 18, ILPS on December 3rd, with Palestine on April 17. So we agreed to celebrate all of them so we can keep promoting this type of events and different support actions. Signing petitions, letters for embassies, etc. We can create all these actions to look for freedom of political prisoners, and we greet political prisoners in Mauritania and in Philippines, and we will be working with you to support you in your struggle. Thank you very much, Diana. We have another question. Are there any people in the webinar who has any question?
Well, it looks like Pablo has a hand raised.
Pablo, perfecto. Adelante, compañero Pablo. Bienvenido.
Welcome, Pablo. You have the floor.
Un poquito bajo, Pablo. Si puedes hablar un poquito más alto, se te escucharía mejor.
Good.
Gracias.
It's hard to hear. Greetings. I come from Querétaro, Mexico. I wanted to ask,
esta campaña estamos conociendo, creo que creemos muy importante una difusión
We want to make public the names and faces of political prisoners. So has there been any communication, any declaration with their names? There are many. We know there are many in Philippines also, but I wanted to ask if we know their names. I also wanted to greet you all from our struggle here in Querétaro. We are struggling against José Alejandro Estrado Valencia, the governor from our region. And we are struggling for Francisco Villa and from other comrades who have been detained by this fascist government. We're also working for Nancy Estrado and other comrades. So yeah, that was my question. We want to also express our support to political prisoners in Palestine. But the question is if there is propaganda with the names and faces of our imprisoned comrades. We want to know their names and bring visibility to their stories. Thank you very much, Paulo. We support your struggle in Querétaro. So, is the question specific to any of the panelists? Or if anybody wants to answer, if there is a list of all political prisoners, and if there's not, it might be a really good idea. You all have the floor if you want to answer. What I could add is that there is not a list of all political prisoners in the world. It's enormous. We have a list from each country and it's changing all the time, but it is a very important task. We need to put their names and last names and their faces. That's why when I intervened, we talked about the cases, even if it's just naming their names. It's very important to bring visibility to each individual. The coordinator has magazine, and we will be publishing more cases. This case, for example, of Mao that we didn't know personally. We need to talk about what's happening in Philippines. We need to understand the numbers. You are all saying we thought there were 10,000 prisoners in Palestine, but now we have no idea the real number. So we need to share the data. It's a job of all of us. We're doing it from the coordinator, and I think it's a very, very important task. Thank you very much, Diana. There are two more questions, one for Peru and one for Guatemala. The first one is for Dr. Sanchez. How can we support the claim of the assassination of Dr. Guzman? We've done several posts You can find them on Facebook. And there are other websites where we've shared some of these claims. We're going to the UN because the state has had enough time to reopen the investigation as we've already demanded. They don't want to do it. There is impunity. They created a law for auto amnesty for military and police who have committed war crimes, and they don't want to give amnesty to the other part. So with all these facts, we want to go to the UN to bring our claim under the Minnesota Protocol regarding death of people in jail. The Peruvian state needs to answer regarding the assassination of Dr. Guzman. We will ask you to amplify the claim we will put at the UN. And for Norma, there is a concrete question. How has the political persecution intensified under a government like Arevalo, like Arevalo's government? That's a very complex question. We have a government that is so-called progressive. It's called a transition government, but we don't think we will have a government as such in the next elections. However, criminalization has been intensifying because for the political and economic actors in the country, Arevalo has been posing a threat to their interests. That's why we have two indigenous authorities in jail today. They have been criminalized by the public ministry. They have been accused of crimes because they led the protest, the 106-day protest. This corruption pact has been saying that there was electoral fraud. The population has been defending their vote in the streets. They are creating different cases. They have freed people that were in prison for corruption, and they've imprisoned people like students from the San Carlos University. The chair of this university was named in a through a fraudulent process. And there are more claims against people who are defending their land. There is no specific data, but when there are violent displacements in those communities, there are more than 600 cases against indigenous people that are defending their land. This corruption pact that is embedded in the state is working against the Arevalo government. Thank you very much, Norma. Raimundo Tovar says that we should demand all international organizations to make a campaign in order to close prisons in Turkey because they go against human dignity, and to stand in solidarity with political prisoners around the world. If there's any additional comment, there is another question in English. Let me translate it. I think this question is for Nona. Could you talk a little bit about the current movement to bring down Marcos, and how would this contribute to the liberation of political prisoners?
Well, currently, there has been a groundswell of protests in the Philippines, mainly precipitated by exposés of bureaucratic corruption. In the human rights community, we have tried to link the issue of political prisoners to this current groundswelling movement by using the slogan, jail the corrupt and free all political prisoners. Our premise is that these corrupt bureaucrats are the ones who should be in jail, and not the political prisoners who have been incarcerated for defending the people's rights, for defending basic rights to land, to decent wages, to decent living to humane living conditions, etc. Since many of these political prisoners were arrested and detained on unjust grounds by security forces under the Marcos government, a change in government it's possible that a change in government would lead to the release of some, if not all, political prisoners. But we emphasize that whatever change there is should no longer be based solely on reactionary elections where it is the elite who keep on winning the elections. There are proposals for the creation of something like a transitional council composed of persons of known integrity, people who have no record of corruption. Some of them may come from the government and some from the civil society groups, for example. And through this transitional council, well, it depends on the composition and, of course, on the receptivity to the people's demands. But we hope that through a transitional council, the demands to release political prisoners will be among the items that will be addressed. We always address the question of political prisoners whenever there is a new administration. But of course, the chances of this issue being addressed will be a lot stronger if the kind of government that is in place is one that is really more receptive to the people's issues. And we think that we can have that kind of government if the shift from one form to another will not solely be based on the usual system of reactionary elections.
Thank you very much, Nona. There's one last question. Sebastian, if you can be very specific in your question, thank you very much.
Gracias, saludos, buenas noches.
Thank you, good evening. I'd like to briefly
Cree cada una de las panelistas y el compañero que las ridículas ideas del fascismo nunca van
say that I would like to say that the ridiculous idea of fascism will never be able to come to reality. The states that don't allow humanity to resist will never be successful. It was a comment, yes. I would like to know what you think about this that I've just said.
El fascismo es la desesperación
Fascism is desperation of bourgeoisie against people's struggles.
de generar disturbios y fracasar.
But it follows the law of creating disturbances and failing, and creating more disturbances and failing. However, or instead, the people's law is not to fail. We keep struggling. We keep struggling until we achieve final victory because we are in the good side of history. That is why fascism will not be able to succeed. People's struggle will conquer the realm of liberty, of freedom, and permanent harmony. Thank you very much, Dr. Miguel. Thank you to all our panelists for voicing the struggle of people who are political prisoners. Thank you very much to all people who came, and people who could not come can see it. It will be on our website so we can keep learning about what's happening in the world regarding political prisoners. Thank you very much. This webinar was a culmination of a week of action between the International Day of Solidarity with Political Prisoners in International Human Rights Day, hosted by the ILPS. If you're not already a member of the ILPS, you can apply for your organization to join. Please visit peoplestruggles.org to learn more about the League and read our many statements on a broad range of anti-imperialist issues. You can click the button in the upper right that says Join ILPS on the website to fill out the application. We want to finish this webinar celebrating Amancio Samuel Guatoro's birthday. My father, the union leader who was kidnapped in 1984. He was tortured during 57 days in a clandestine prison, and he was identified in 2011 by an forensic anthropology foundation. It's an honor celebrating his birthday and his struggle with this seminar. We have our prisoners and our martyrs in our hearts. We raise our fist and we hope to support and strengthen national freedom. Long live international solidarity.